Well, good afternoon, folks from Houston User Group. This is Bill Wright, Regional Sales Manager at DWS. In a few moments, my colleague Sean Meyer, who's our lead product developer for Dimension Swift Test, is going to take you on a guided demo of both Dimension Swift Test and Dimension Focus. It's been a while since I last met all of you. I think it was at the Test Center in December for the holiday party, December of 2019, obviously, since we had a little issue with COVID. I'm glad to be here today and conducting this presentation, but I also look forward to seeing you all again and attending Hug events in person. Great group of folks, and again, thank you very much for coming to this webinar. So today we're going to look at the value of test automation, and at DWS we have a little tagline that we like to tell our customers, that it's about running projects, smaller projects, and running them faster and running them smarter. So let's look at the agenda today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this PowerPoint because the main focus today is twofold. Number one, I want you to hear from a customer, and not just a customer, but a customer that is near and dear to your hearts in Hug, and that's Mr. Tim Randall from Granite Construction. Tim has been using our Dimension Swift Test and Dimension Focus products, and he's going to tell you in a few moments, he's going to tell you how he uses them, his team uses them, and the impact that they have. But let's look at the agenda here. We're going to talk about the functional testing opportunity, the value that test automation brings. And I think when people think of test automation, they think of speeding tests. That's certainly part of it. But the value of test automation is not just about speed. It's about accuracy, it's about efficiency, and it's definitely about planning what you need to test. And our testing solutions will do that. They will provide very, very compelling results. And then we will close. I don't know if we're going to have time for a Q&A. So that said, if you see anything as my colleague Sean is demoing the automation solutions, please just ask, raise your hand, and we can do that. Otherwise, I will provide you with my email address, and you can email me, and feel free to email any questions that you might have. And if you'd like me to set up an in-depth demo of these tools for you and your colleagues, I will be most happy to do so. So about us. Most of you, I think, are familiar, at least the names that I've seen in here that registered. Most of you are familiar with us. We are an Oracle Gold partner. DWS was founded in 1998. And back then, when we were initially founded, we really were basically specializing in JDE1 from a development and tech services. We were really helping customers modify the Oracle code. And then after that, we started to look at solutions that were out in the marketplace for test automation. And a lot of those solutions were either A, very, very difficult if you weren't a very skilled technical IT person, and B, some of them were akin to, I like to use the analogy, using a jackhammer to hammer in a nail. It was overkill. So we saw the opportunity to build from the ground up solutions that are customized for Oracle JDE1. And in the case of our Dimension Swift Test product, we have come out with Dimension Swift Test for Oracle Cloud Apps customers as well. So again, we have a global customer base. I handle accounts primarily in North America, US, and Canada, although I have many European accounts as well. We have staff in 10 countries. I actually think that is now up to 12. We have staff in South Africa, New Zealand, Europe, the US, Canada. And as I said, we started as a system integrator and software vendor, and we produce a suite of testing products for JDE1, which we're going to see in a few moments. We support the life cycle. I don't think that there's many implementations, new greenfield implementations that are going on, but we certainly support that. Most of the folks right now, most of the organizations that run JDE are in the maintenance and certainly a lot in the past 3 years have upgraded to 9.2. And then going forward, once you're on 9.2, establishing a cadence and executing on that cadence for code current for continuous innovation. So let's look at the functional testing opportunity. You know, anywhere from 25% to 65% of the total time and effort that's attributed to any change event project is spent on testing. And that's a very, very large amount of time. So, you know, it's easily seen how folks can get really burdened with manual testing to the point where they're unable to take updates regularly from Oracle. And this, of course, creates problems down the road when you're trying to look at continuous innovation or adopt, as I said, a cadence of that. One of the things that we see continuously, we look at continuously, is the World Quality Report Survey. And back in 2019, 2020, respondents had said that more than a third of their overall IT budget was allocated to testing and QA functions. Again, speaks to the opportunity for functional testing, for automation testing. So what are the testing bottlenecks? Well, every one of you that's on this webinar, this broadcast, probably sees this daily, right? Knowing what to test. What do we need to test? We don't want to burn resources on things we don't want to test or don't need to test. Planning and managing these tests. How do we set up our test scripts? Who's available to do the testing? That's always a big problem in any organization. And then you want to have a repeatable framework that you can hand over repeatable testing from the project team to the users. You want to document that, and you also want to allow plenty of time and effort to test and retest as necessary. So again, we're going to be focusing on, these are our tools right here, but for today's demonstration, we're going to be focusing on Swift Test and Focus. Load test, it takes the stress out of testing. We can deal with that another day, but basically what load test allows you to do is easily, quickly simulate load by using virtual users and virtual user days. It's a fantastic product that I actually have a couple of customers right now that are moving to OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and they are using load tests to test performance, not only in the new OCI, but also from their Enterprise One environment. So let's talk about this. You know, our solutions, Swift Test, Focus, and Load Test, and the value testing automation, I just said it's repeatable. You need to have a consistent, reliable test methodology because when you do, it is very easy to reduce risk and also improve the quality and accuracy of your testing. And then reducing the amount of testing required, easing that burden of manual testing. So smaller, faster, smarter projects. We just talked about that, right? Here's the problem with manual testing. In a manual testing environment, as you know, you're going to need X amount of time. And then X is going to clearly vary depending on the size of your particular project. So let's say that dimension focus, when you do an analysis, and you'll see focus in a few minutes, if dimension focus tells you that you only need to test 25% of this 100%, then right then and there, okay, you've immediately reduced your testing effort by 75%. But using Dimension Swift Test on average, and this is an average because we have many customers that will tell you it's much higher, but on average, our global customers using Swift Test will tell you that they're saving 40% the time from a manual test approach. But if you save 40%, you only need 60% of your manual effort. Well, we just said that with Dimension Focus, you've reduced it by 75%. So it's not 60% of the 100%, it's actually 60% of the 25%. So you can see really, really quickly how you can reduce the time and also improve the accuracy, because as we're going to see, these solutions, you get all of the documentation. And in the case of Swift Test, when you add new users, whether they're business analysts or super users, you have in your testing library stored in Swift Test every single test that you've ever run. So it's very easy for somebody new to the staff to look at the test scripts, how they're created, and easily reproduce them according to how you want to set up your tests. So our testing solution, what you need to know, I said the solutions application where they are. They're made exclusively for JDE1. We're not generic. Everything we do is around Oracle JD Edwards. They are business analyst and super user friendly. You do not need to be a technical, skilled CNC architect, etc. They have near zero client installs, very, very quickly to install. We provide a self-paced training that allows our users to get up to speed in hours and days, not weeks. It's very, very important. Two ways we do that. We have a product specialist that takes people through an initial 2-hour onboarding in terms of Dimension Swift test. In terms of Dimension Focus, our technical team, when you do a Dimension Focus run, Tim will talk to you in a moment about that. We'll give you all of the results, share the results, and walk you through those results. And then additionally, we partner with iLearn ERP, which is a tremendous online learning academy, and they've created with us a DWS learning academy for any product, Swift test, Focus, or load test that you own. So we provide support throughout the learning curve, and as I said, the time to value is a matter of days in bringing customers up to speed. We just looked at that. I'm not going to bother with this. The benefits of Swift test: easy to set up, easy to edit. You can reuse and combine tests any way you want using test queues. Sean will talk more about test queues when he does the demo, but you can actually link tests together, test queues together, to create business processes like an order to cash, a procure to pay. You can soft code the scripts. We have both dynamic repository data stores, and you can schedule testing unattended for whenever time you want. Dimension Focus, we talked about Swift test being the automation, the speed tool, right? Dimension Focus. Focus concentrates on only what you need to test. So for example, let's say you looked at a set of ESUs that Oracle sent out. You said, we want to take these. What if we take these ESUs, what does it mean to our environment? What objects are affected? How are they affected? Well, what Focus is going to do is it's going to provide you with a forensic analysis of your entire environment. It's going to analyze the code down to the lowest level of detail. And it's going to determine precisely where you need to test and only where you need to test. So you don't burn valuable time and resources on testing things that you don't need to, okay? We have a heat map that shows you where to focus your testing effort in terms of objects impacted, severity of impact, okay? And then, as I said, results. There's many examples of results. You can go to our website, you can come through me, I'll gladly provide you with them. I'll gladly provide you, people that are using our software. But one in particular was a life sciences company, and this is on our website. And, in industries that are heavily regulated, compliance, life sciences, financial services, right? Dimension Swift test is particularly good in this area because not only is it providing accurate, reliable testing, it's also providing an audit trail for governance, for validation. So if an auditor comes in and says, "I want to see examples of what you've done," every test that you ran is in the Swift test catalog. Additionally, we had another customer, Li and Feng, that globally adopted Swift tests, and as you can see, it cut their project time in half. And when you think of half across 350 distribution locations, that's a major time, okay? As I said, you can contact me at any time. My name is Bill Wright. My email address is william.wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, @ dws-global.com. At this time, I want to just introduce, and you all know him, is Tim Randall from Granite Communications. And Tim will just talk for a few minutes about how he and his team are utilizing Dimension Swift test and Dimension Focus in their environment. Tim?
Hey everybody, how's it going? So yeah, to talk about how Granite is using Swift test. Last year we did a tools upgrade. At that time we had only 100 or so of our 1,000 tests automated through the Swift test process. So we use that to get our business a level of comfort knowing that the system hadn't changed. Even just we had to create not only the tests, but we had to create kind of a methodology or verbiage about if Swift test ran, what was that called? So if Swift test ran successful, that was a success. It was not a pass test. And then we had our users review the output that Swift test gives, which is pretty comprehensive. It goes through every step of your test script that you have. I would create PDFs on there, and then our business would review those and accept/pass those tests. It did save us quite a bit of time in our upgrade last year. We are launching, in fact, this weekend, we're starting our next cycle of tools upgrade for this year. We have something like 600 tests that we're going to use. We're going to do, again, the same methodology where we run IT will run our automated tests that we have. The users, the business will then review those output and either accept it or do their own testing and then go forward. Last year, it probably saved us, our user said it saved close to about 25% of the time with only that 100 or so of our 1,000 test scripts. This year, we expect to save quite a bit more.
Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, continue.
No, that was about it. We
Okay.
maintain, our tests. We continue to try to get there. We have a goal of trying to get 75% of all of our test scripts automated, because we just know that we'll never be able to get 100% because there's always something that requires a manual interaction or something like that. So, but we go through, as part of our continuous improvement, that effort to maintain and continue to get take out test scripts, put in new ones, stuff like that. Next year we'll be doing an apps upgrade as well, and we plan to use that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, Tim. And I just want to echo what Tim just said about using these tools, not just to save time, right, on your testing and your scripting. That's certainly a part of it. But a big part of it is it's almost impossible. Well, actually, it is impossible to really think about continuous adoption and continuous innovation if you can't accurately and adequately test. And I don't know, you probably attended, I know I did virtually last week, the InFocus conference, and there were really two companies in particular that did sessions that are utilizing our solutions and walked through not just the solutions that they're utilizing from DWS, which you're going to see in a moment, but how it's impacted their organization. One was PrintPack in Atlanta, Georgia. The other was WISPAC, and the WISPAC session was given by CSS, the system integrator. So with an eye, in the immediate time frame, automating your testing to reduce time, and then again with dimension focus, knowing what to test, so you're not only reducing the time, but you're greatly reducing it because you're not burning it on testing things that don't need to test. And what you'll be able to do by overcoming this manual burden of testing is regularly adopt the functionality that Oracle is giving you. Do things like tools releases, and that sets you up for continuous adoption. And then when you get to look at that, each project, each change event project becomes smaller, becomes faster, and you're delivering value to the business. And in IT, that's what we're all about, right? Every one of us in IT is about delivering value to the business. So with that in mind, I am going to switch over now to my colleague, Sean Meyer. Sean is our product developer for Dimension Swift Test. He's going to take you through a guided tour of Swift Test and Dimension Focus. Sean, you're on deck.
Thanks, Bill. So we're going to start off in Dimension Swift Test, and we're going to be starting off in the hub which is our online portal for our software and our services. And we're having a very high level overview of what's been going on in this environment for the month of March. And here you can see a list of projects and scenarios, and that's the structure of SwiftTest, where you've got a list of projects. Each project is made up of one or more scenarios, and each scenario is made up of one or more tests. And we are on purpose unopinionated about how you set this up, because every organization's got a different idea about how this should be structured and naming conventions and all those kinds of things. But one way that we've seen customers use this really successfully is to create a base catalog of tests. So this would be a library of all of your up-to-date current tests that at any point you can just click play on those, and those will run through all the tests and prove that your system is working the way that you expect it to. But the idea is you don't do the testing in this base catalog. Whenever there is an event that you need to do testing, like maybe a sales order entry modification where you've got to test either the whole of sales or part of sales, or maybe it's something quite big, like a big upgrade to 9.2, or maybe you're applying some ESUs to get code current. Whatever the reason is for the testing that you need to do, you will copy the base catalog, create this testing project. You can either copy the whole thing or just parts of it, as you need to. And then you'll do all of your testing in the testing project. That'll keep track of all of the testing that was done. So who ran the test, did it pass, did it fail, take screenshots. SwiftTest is also self-documenting, which is, in my opinion, probably the worst part of testing, is generating the documentation that proves that you did the testing that you were supposed to. So SwiftTest can generate all that documentation for you, and that's always available from the testing project. So once you're finished with the testing project, you can kind of like archive it. And if you do make any changes to the tests, because JD Edwards is a system that changes a lot, you can make mods, you can change a processing option, and that changes the whole flow of an application. If you do need to make any changes to those tests, you copy those back to the base catalog so that it's always up to date, and we've got different methodologies that you can use to do that. But this whole thing is entirely optional. You don't have to structure it like that. You just have one project and do all your testing in there if you wanted to. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to the SwiftTest client. So this is a Windows desktop application. It's really lightweight. It's only about 20 megabytes in total. It doesn't require a fat client. It just needs a Windows machine that has access to your E1 instance. So we're seeing the same list of projects and scenarios that we saw in the hub. This is the project that we'll be using today, and we're going to do some testing on the GL. So I'm going to go off to my base catalog, and I'm going to copy a couple of tests. So this test is going to create a journal entry. And then what it's going to do is it's going to store the batch number that's created. And then this test will take that batch and update the status to pending. Oops. To copy it to the scenario. And this one will update the status to approved. And then this one will post it. Okay, so we've got a small batch of tests around the GL system that we can start testing with. So I'm going to kick off the first test, and then I'll talk you through what it's doing. Okay, so the very first thing that it's going to do, it's going to check if we've got an open browser, and we don't, so it's going to throw open a new browser. In this case, we're using Edge, and then it's going to log in using the settings that I've set up at project level, but you can override those at design time or at runtime. Then it's going to open P0911 with a default version. Then it's going to click add. Then it's loading data from the repository data store, which we've got two types of data stores. I'll come back to those in just a minute. Then with the data that it's loaded, it's entered some header information. It's created 2 grid rows. It's clicked OK to create a batch. And here it's stored the batch number in the runtime data store, which is separate to the repository data store. And then because it's a good test, it's going to close down all the applications that it's opened, and it's going to log out. Okay, so we've got 2 data stores in SwiftTest. The first one, called the repository data store. You can think of a repository kind of like a spreadsheet. So you would create as many columns in the spreadsheet as you want. It's the same kind of thing with a repository. That's a great place to store like master data, list of customers or business units or items, stuff like that you need to keep track of, and you need to use that data in your tests. It's also a really good place to store something like a GL date. This might move on every single month in your production environment, but possibly it doesn't in your dev or your PY. And then depending on what you're doing, you might copy production data into dev or PY where you're doing your testing, and then you don't want your tests to be hard-coded to use data like that. It's much better to soft code that data in a repository, for example, and then as the data changes, you just update it in one place, and that'll filter through to all your tests. And then the second data store that we've got is the runtime data store. And that's used like we're using it here. We're fetching data off the page in E1, and we're going to use that either in the same test, or we can pass it to other tests, and thereby sharing data between tests in the same scenario. So in this example, we're storing the batch number, and we'll pass it to this test. We'll update the stage depending. This one will approve it, and this one will post it. So this is the execution of the test. As you can see, we keep a lot of information about the test. Who executed it, how long did it take, were there any errors on the screen when it executed, what are the parameter values. We also keep track of, as the test is running, the application version and form that it's running against. We also take screenshots, so you can actually follow the test along as it's running. And at a high level, you can kind of use this to figure out what went wrong when a test fails, and who's the right person to have a look at either fixing E1 or fixing the test because something's changed. And all of this information, the projects, the scenarios, the tests, the test execution history, screenshots, all of that's stored in our secure cloud. So that's why Swiftest, the application, has such a light footprint. It's only about 20 megabytes to install. That's all you need to create and run tests. So we don't have access to your servers or databases. The only way that we interact with JD Edwards is using the web clients. So we're just replicating what an actual real life user can do. We on purpose don't try and do anything more than that. But because it's all available in the cloud, it means that we can access it from the hub, and we can also do things like generate reports. So this is a PDF of the test that I just ran. This is step by step each action. It's got a screenshot of the browser as it's running with all the details. You can also extract this information as a Word doc, so it's editable, and you can also extract it as a spreadsheet as well without the screenshots. But we built this as test execution history, but what some customers are doing is printing this out and putting it in their training manuals, because it does actually tell you how to enter a journal entry with screenshots. Open the application, it looks like this. Click the add button, it looks like this. So possibly that could be helpful for you as well. Question just came through about using different browsers. We support Edge, Chrome, and Firefox. And with Edge and Chrome, you can also run those in headless mode, which means that it doesn't draw the browser on the screen. It's still running Chrome and Edge in memory, so it'll still take screenshots. Everything will work as it does, but you just won't see anything being drawn on the screen. So it's quite useful if you're doing a really long running test and you don't want it to interfere with what's going on in that machine. So it'll just keep running. Okay, now let me show you how to create a test from scratch. Okay, so I've got a test here. It's called SO001 sales order, and we're going to start adding some actions to this test. So this is quite a different method to record and playback. We think this is a much better method for creating tests. It's not record and playback. That's fine, and it's got its benefits, but the biggest problem with record and playback is when things change, unless you're quite technical and depending on what you're using, very often you just have to throw that whole recording away. You can't change it, and that's just a huge waste of time. If you've recorded this very long process, using our example before, creating a journal entry, proving a batch, posting it, voiding it, doing whatever, and then something changes, you potentially have to throw that whole thing away and re-record the whole thing. But here you're creating, these are little actions for everything that you can do in E1. For example, logging in. You build the test up action by action, but then it's really easy to maintain these tests by editing the actions directly, or if you've got similar processes, you can copy the whole test and then just tweak little actions as you need them. So we got actions for just about everything you can do in E1. These are common things that you're going to use in every test, like entering a form value or entering a grid value. General stuff like logging in with a different role, launching an application from FastPath. We've got actions that add a lot more flexibility to your test. So you can create conditional actions like if the batch status is not posted, then run this group of actions which will post the batch. Or you could do a while action, say while the batch isn't posted, pause, wait for 10 seconds, then press the find button to get the latest data on the screen, then go and fetch the batch status, and then check that again, so that the test will only continue running once a condition is met. You can also add comments to your tests. We're busy building an integration with the orchestrator. You can send emails, bunch of actions around form controls, visual assist, things like that, all around the grid and the QBE, application menus, tabs, batch applications. So you can set processing options or data selection before you execute a report. You can interact with E1 pages. There's a bunch of actions around getting data in and out of the data stores, and you can do things like dates, numeric and string calculations. And you can also interact with E1 menus and media objects. But because this is aware of JD Edwards, it knows where you are and what you're doing, you can turn on filtering, so we can hide all of the noise, all of the actions we can't perform right now because we don't even have a browser open. So pretty much the only two actions we can perform that are specific to E1 is logging in or logging in with a different role. So I'm going to execute that, and that's going to use the settings that I've set up at project level, but I can override those before I executed that, or as we're designing it, or before we execute the test itself. And now that we've logged in and we've got an open session, you'll see that there's more actions we can perform, like FastPath. We can launch P4210, or we could interact with the E1 menus, or we could launch a batch application. So I'm just going to launch P4210 with no particular form and no particular version. Just going to launch JD0001. And then I'm going to use this shortcut over here to interact with these menu items up here. And that's going to click on the add button to take us to the revision screen so I can start entering an order. And what I want to do is set that branch plant to a value of 30. So I'm going to use the enter form value action. That's going to read all of the form controls on this page and make those available as a drop down for me. You'll see base is currently in red there, which means that base is currently selected here. So once I change that to branch plant, you'll see branch plant gets highlighted. I don't want to append, I just want to use this very specific value. I'm going to hard code this test and set that to a value of 30. So this works just as well with modified objects as it does with standard objects. So if you had made a mod here, there was extra form control, it would be available in that drop down. So you don't need any technical skills to use this tool. If you know how to enter a sales order in JD Edwards, you with a bit of training will know how to enter a sales order with Swiftest. So I'm going to execute that. That will enter the value here and will force it to execute the event rules behind that. So it will format it nicely, it will validate it, it will bring back the company and the currency, but it'll also look for errors on the page like this, where there's actually an error here, and this will cause Swiftest to fail if it's not expecting the error, but that isn't the only metric for a test, passing or failing. You can also grab data from the page using the runtime data store and then test that it's equal to the expected value. Maybe you've done a mod to the advanced pricing master business function, and if you create orders with certain items and customers and business units on this date, you should get this price. So you can set up to test to do all of that, grab the expected value from the page after the order's been created, and then compare that it's equal to the expected value. And if that's not correct, then the test will fail. And you can take that a step further and soft code everything so that it's fully data driven and you don't need to change the test as the data changes, you just update the data. But you can also tell Swiftest to look for these errors, to create these negative tests so that, you know, maybe there really is a branch plant X, but I don't have access to it, my role doesn't, and you need to test that a whole bunch of users don't, and I only want to know about it if I can enter this order. So the test will only fail if I don't get the error message. So you can do that kind of stuff as well. So hopefully that gave you an idea about how we create tests. I'm not going to take that any further just because we're running short on time today. But you build tests up action by action, you know, very small building blocks. But we feel that this is a great way to build tests, and it makes them very, very maintainable. You know, I can just edit this action directly or copy it to another test or whatever it is. So the next thing I want to talk about is not the data repository, is test queues. So these are the tests we were looking at earlier. We've got a create a journal entry, store the batch number, pass it to this test, which will change the status depending, approve it, post it, and void it. This is how you chain the tests together to do something sort of more interesting and more meaningful than just almost like a little unit test, which is just going to create a journal entry and nothing else. But this becomes really powerful when you use these tests as little building blocks to do, you know, to test a much bigger part of this system. So, you know, maybe we've got 10 different journal entry tests which create, you know, journal entry slightly different way. There's a standard one, a model one, intercompany, foreign, whatever it is. You don't have to re-record tests 2 to 5 to be able to test every single one of those different journal entry types. You can reuse these tests and save yourself a huge amount of time, and then just create 10 different test queues and just swap out the first test in each queue. It becomes really, really powerful doing that kind of stuff. And then depending on your change controls, how regulated you are, when something happens, you know, imagine that in this test, you now have to enter a password before you can approve a batch. You could just go directly to this test and edit it and fix those, you know, those 10 test queues to make it pass. Or maybe that's what you don't want to do. You want to copy this test to create a new version of it, and then pull out the old version and fix it in the new version, and then update all of those 10 test queues. It just depends on how you want to do that. But this is a very, very powerful tool. Okay, just in the interest of time, I'm going to end it there with Swiftest, and I'm going to move across to Dimension Focus now. So Dimension Focus is our tool that tells you how your system will be changed by applying a change, whether that change comes from Oracle in the form of an ESU or from your developers. So what we ask you to do, this requires a bit more setup than Dimension Swiftest, is to get your production and your pristine environments at the same ESU level. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer they are, the more accurate results we can give you. So hopefully the only difference between those two environments are your modifications. Then you build a full package for both of those environments, deploy those to a fact client, and then you download, if you're running this in ESU mode, you would download all of the ESUs that you would like to apply to those environments. You don't have to apply them. You can if you want to, but you can just download them and put them on the fact client. And then you download our extract tool, and that will extract all of your objects and all of the ESUs that you'd like to apply as encrypted text files, and those, it sends us all the data, and we process that through the Dimension Focus engine, and that's what appears as a project in this page. So this is showing us when it was created, how many objects, ESU objects are in there, and we can go off to the details page. There's a lot of details in this page, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just talk to a couple of them. So we create this list of objects which have been directly affected by the ESU or by the modification, and then we make a list of all the objects which directly affect those, and then we go up a level and we make a list of all the objects which affect the ESU, and we keep doing that. We go up and up and up. We create this huge hierarchy of dependencies, and then we travel up that from the ESU object until we find the first batch or interactive application, and that's what we call the master parent. And that's important because not all people know how to use or test a second-tier object like a data structure or a business function or something like that. But they do know how to use the interactive batch applications that they use on a day-to-day basis. So here, looking at this data, we can see that only 2% or just over 2% of the master parent objects will be affected at all by applying this ESU and will require some level of testing. So it's not a huge amount of effort to apply this ESU. It turns out not all master parents are on a menu, so we go up another level until we find the first or the next interactive or batch application that's also on the menu, and that's what we call the execution point. And there's a lot of data around there. We also break down system codes and user roles, which is really interesting data because you can figure out what kind of user needs to test this. What kind of people you're going to be pulling out of their day jobs to do this kind of testing. And breakdown of the ESU itself, what kind of objects are in there, and which ESUs they come from if you're loading more than one. And now we're moving across the heat map, which is where we kind of see users doing the most amount of work. This is showing objects in different ways, master parents we've spoken about, or execution points, or you can look at the objects which are totally unaffected by this ESU or the ESU objects themselves. You can perform certain processing on them, mark them as tested or untested, or assign them to a user so that they can start working through this object and testing it. You can also create very basic, almost like skeleton tests, or swiftest scripts from here. These are very basic at this stage. They pretty much just log into E1, launch the application, close the application, and log out. And it's something that we'd like to work on in future and see if we can build that out a little bit more. We don't have your data, so it becomes a difficult thing to do. But we'd like to improve that slightly. But I think they still are very helpful because they are bookmarks. If you are someone that is going to be using Swiftest to build out some tests, you can always create those skeleton scripts, and then that these are all the tests that you have to build out. You can also perform a lot of filtering on this grid, but this is showing us the 350 master parent objects that have been affected by this ESU, and those are sorted by the total testing score. So for every change that happens to this object, we allocate a certain number of points, and depending on how far this object is away in the hierarchy of dependencies away from the actual ESU object, it will get more and more points the closer it is. So we can confidently say that this object has been the most affected by this ESU and requires the most amount of testing, whereas these objects on page 35, they still require some testing, but definitely not as much as these objects. So we'll have a look at the address book master. This is what we call the linker page. This is a visual representation of how this object has been affected by this ESU. So this is a blue node, which means it's an execution point. It's on a menu. Here we can look at where exactly this object has been affected, the form, the control, and the event. We can go off to the ESU itself if we want to have a look at that, see a bit more detail about that. But the idea is you work from left to right. So this is showing us 3 forms, form A, B, and C. I actually don't know how many forms are in the address book master. It's been a while since I've been in there, but there's definitely more than 3. I think there's maybe 5 or 6. But this is showing us that these are the only forms we care about. The rest are totally unaffected. We don't have to test them. These red nodes up here are showing us that these objects have been affected by the ESU in this form, these controls, and that button. The white node means that it hasn't been affected, but it's calling something which has been affected. So on the post dialog is initialized, it's calling this business function, which has been affected because it's a red node. So the idea is you put your knowledge together about why you're applying this ESU or making this mod, what it's supposed to be solving, and you use this visual representation of how the object has been changed, or maybe not change itself, but how it's calling an object which has been changed. And you put all of that information together to focus all your testing efforts on where is important and where requires the most amount of testing. And as soon as you've tested this, you can mark that particular node or all the nodes below it as tested. My mouse seems to be playing up there. There we go. Which will just kind of change that node, and then you work through all the different nodes before you mark the whole object as itself is tested.
Sean, I just want to quickly mention too, what you're seeing, folks, dimension focus that Sean is showing you. One, on the initial dimension focus run, and it may be in successive, but at least on the initial dimension focus run, and Tim can speak to this as well, we will go over this with you. We'll take a look at the extracts and put them through our engine, and then we will submit this data back and walk you through this data. So, I mean, I know what Sean's showing you right now is kind of fast, but this goes into so much detail that for every change event, I mean, and that's the thing with, you know, Oracle continuously delivering these updates, right? The good news is they're continuously delivering updates to provide you feature and functionality with your JD Edwards environment. However, that continuous delivery requires that you're going to have a lot more projects, and they're going to come in with increased frequency. So a tool like Dimension Focus is huge in understanding just what you need to test and only what you need to test. All right, Sean.
I think that's just about everything from me. I think we've hit our time cap exactly.
Okay, Sean, I want to thank you very much. Tremendous demo. I know it was very, very difficult to fly through Swift test and focus. And folks, we only had a certain, you know, amount of allotted time today. So again, anyone that has any questions around Dimension, Swift test, focus, anything that we do at DWS, my name is William Wright. You can text me at william.wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, at dws-global.com. I will get back you questions. I see some of my customers on this webinar today. That's always nice to see. But yeah, any way we can help you out, any questions that you have, and we can certainly set up subsequent demos where we'll go in more depth. Sean will go in deeper, do a deeper dive, because again, we only had so much time today. Unless there's any questions right now, I want to thank Sean. I especially would like to thank Tim Randall for his participation today. And I really, really look forward to seeing you folks again in person soon, hopefully. Rachel, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that's fine. No questions come in. You know, I think we've covered it well in the time. So yeah, with that, if there's nothing else, we'd just like to say thanks everyone for participating, and just reach out to us if you need any more information. Thank you.
We thank you all. Have a wonderful day now.